Hi, I'm Zach. I'm a territory manager with RMS Roller-Grinder, and I have Luke Zebroski here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the rolls in your machine. So, just to start off at kind of a low level, Luke, tell us what are the signs, or what is a dull roll even?
Simply some ways to tell, I guess, that your rolls are dull. Probably the most common and first thing that you're going to see is going to be loss in capacity. So just simply put, you bought your roller mill for 24 tons per hour at 500 micron. Now that machine's running at 20 ton per hour at 500 micron. And I guess I could relate it to something that everybody knows something about is like worn tires versus new tires, right? A little bit of rain on the road, you're kind of all over the place with those dull tires compared to if you had full grip tires, which is super similar action that happens, with the rolls.
Yeah, so it's like that. When you get them, they're sharp, and
Yep.
then just like the word says, they're dull. That sharp point goes
Yeah,
down to a flat.
they start rounding over, and no longer are they pulling the corn through the way that they used to when they were, a full sharp groove. Um, the other thing you're going to see commonly, and I always say this to customers, no standard, no problem when it comes to testing micron size or standard deviation, but you usually will start seeing some diminished quality as well. And that usually comes from more of the smashing and not the cutting of rounded versus sharp grooves. Similar to a dull knife, you're trying to cut a tomato, you have to apply blunt force
Right.
instead of like slicing it with a sharp knife. Very similar.
And that can lead to other things too, right?
Right, and generally too, Zach brings me to my last point, and that's going to be, the increase in energy consumption. Energy is something that continues to go up year after year, but because the rolls can't pull the same amount of material through in the same amount of time, most generally you have to run your facility longer, and that's not just the roller mill. I mean, that's everything. The mixer, all the legs, all that sort of stuff. To again be able to produce the same amount of ground corn or finished feed in a less time.
Right. It's just like you were talking with that dull knife on a tomato. I mean, if you got a sharp one, it doesn't take any time or any force. You got
Right.
a dull one, you got to try a lot harder. And it's the same thing with dull rolls.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And then, so that takes you to the bottom line. Like, what can those negative effects, how do they cost, and are there any other negative effects that we didn't touch on?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll just dive into really like those same three again, and it's loss of capacity, and to me, what that equals is that equals more overtime for your employees. And what it also does is any sort of excess capacity that you once had, you no longer have it. So you're not able to go out and grab new customers because you have no meat left on the bone. You're already working 20, 24 hours a day just to be able to keep up with demand.
You're maxed out.
Yeah, exactly. Maxed out. Second would be diminished quality. So once again, going to that tomato reference, when you're smashing instead of cutting, you do have a greater risk of a higher standard deviation and a lot harder to be able to really dial in that grind to hit your specific particle size day in and day out. And really, that goes back to the geometry of those grooves rounding over versus a sharp groove.
Yeah. And when you don't have quality, we all know that you're losing customers, you're losing money.
Absolutely. Yeah, and brand, reputation's everything in this business. And what comes out of your mill is a perfect representation of who you are as a company.
Right.
And you have the risk of, having people question that.
Right.
The last one, which we touched on it a little bit, but it's just once again that dang energy. It doesn't matter, and you may not see it when they first start getting dull, but all of a sudden you're going to start looking at your overtime, and you're going to see Johnny and Billy's overtime at the feed mill start to go up by maybe 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. But what you're not considering, once again, is all that other equipment and all that other energy hours that you're using this equipment for isn't taken into consideration usually.
Right, like they say you don't have to pay a machine. Well, that's not necessarily true. If it's running, you're paying for that thing to run energy-wise.
Correct. Simply your overhead just starts to explode.
Right, and in the world of trying to cut costs, if you can do it there, that's never a bad thing.
Absolutely.
And then, so everyone's trying to push them as far as they can, right? Because they don't want that cost, but it ends up biting them. Is there a way to measure these rolls maybe before? Like, what are the ways to kind of see them being dull?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we get a lot of phone calls about that. Back when I first started with RMS, I'll be honest with you, most commonly us and the customers used a time and bushel, based inspection, and we know per roll size, per grind spec, a range of bushels, that these rolls should be able to hit. The problem with it is it doesn't take into consideration the amount of foreign material that's within that corn, the genetics of the corn, the moistures, all that sort of stuff. That all throws that time and bushel inspection kind of for a loop, I would say, to where I still feel like you have a pretty high chance of missing the mark and getting into, I'm just going to say, a chaotic situation where you need to get your rolls changed tomorrow.
Yeah, because just like you talked, I mean, corn differs from year to year, season to season, so you're kind of just banking it on an average and hoping that it's in there.
Correct. Yeah, so I mean, in that scenario, you're either leaving meat on the bones or you waited too long.
Right, and you're struggling to keep up.
Right.
That kind of suffering.
The second way that we use most common is going to be a mold inspection. So that's a 2-part metallurgy epoxy that we put on the rolls. We take impressions and then they get sent back to RMS to get measured in our lab. We have a good average of all the different customer locations that we serve, where that depth of groove and that profile starts to get to a certain point that we're able to predict, I would say, plus or minus a month to when those rolls should get pulled out. And that was really what we were trying to do when we developed the mold measuring system, was be proactive about it, right? Because just like it's not good for the customer in those chaotic situations that need to get their rolls pulled out right away, it's also chaotic for RMS as well. And then the last, probably the most accurate way to do it is going to be it's a optical comparator, and there's a couple different types out there, but they either use photo imagery or laser measurements to measure the profile and the groove depth. The problem with these is these are fairly expensive pieces of equipment. We have a couple that we use internally, but it's not usually economical to have sitting around your feed mill or whatever like that to use it as an inspection piece. But as I said, the most accurate way. And the reason why it's the most accurate is there's the least amount of human measuring involved.
Yeah, if you take it out of our hands, it usually does a little better. And in this day of data-driven decisions all the time, those last two options are probably going to be your best bet to at least, foresee what's coming in the future.
Yeah, it's no joke. It's a financial investment when our customers are putting sharp rolls in their machine, and it's, if I were in their position, I would try to use the most accurate way to measure to get the most out of this investment, but at the same time not get you to the point where you have the increased overtime, the increased energy efficiency, and pissed off customers. There's that fine line there.
Yeah, you're trying to walk right up to it without falling off the edge, right? You don't want to suffer any of those negatives, but you want to get right up to that point where the day you change them out is the day you see it.
Absolutely. And really the way to do that is consistent, accurate measuring.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I appreciate the time, Luke. And if you guys have any questions about, seeing if your rolls are dull or using those mold kits that we talked about to learn more about the state of your rolls, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to help you.
Yeah, thanks for your time, guys.